my YouTube channel, One Race, Human Race, All Human. Today is Friday, May 27th, 2022. Terrible thing that happened down in Texas.
Buy 1,600 magazines. Should an 18-year-old be able to buy an AR, a military assault style weapon? And every single one of them, gun owners, people who like to shoot, who sometimes do it for fun, said no. This is not right. Something has to change. But they don't have the faith that something will. And I think one of the most difficult things is the way in which all of this, Nicole, has been communicated over the last couple of days, right? The misleading, quote unquote, facts they have been telling us that turned out to be absolutely wrong. That there was a school resource officer here, there wasn't. That there was 12 minutes between when he crashed to when he entered the school, it's now 5. That all of these 911 calls were coming in as 19 officers stood outside. All of those things have been corrected and changed, there is less and less trust that they are going to get the truth. Even if the truth eventually comes out, even if there's an admission of not compliance or sheriff not acting appropriately, I don't think anyone's going to trust anything that's coming out of this police department at this point.
Jasmine, I know you have some reporting to do before you come back and spend some more time with us. We're going to let you go do that. Thank you so much for your reporting on the scene.
Here over the last 24 hours. They're all gun owners. They own a lot of guns. And I say that to them, first question out. I know you own a lot of guns. I know this is Texas. Should an 18-year-old be able to buy 1,600 magazines? Should an 18-year-old be able to buy an AR, a military assault style weapon? And every single one of them, gun owners, people who like to shoot, who sometimes do it for fun, said no. This is not right. Something has to change. But they don't have the faith that something will. And I think one of the most difficult things is the way in which all of this, Nicole, has been communicated over the last couple of days, right? The misleading, quote unquote, facts they have been telling us that turned out to be absolutely wrong. That there was a school resource officer here, there wasn't. That there was 12 minutes between when he crashed to when he entered the school, it's now 5. That all of these 911 calls were coming in as 19 officers stood outside. All of those things have been corrected and changed, there is less and less trust that they are going to get the truth. Even if the truth eventually comes out, even if there's an admission of not compliance or sheriff not acting appropriately, I don't think anyone's going to trust anything that's coming out of this police department at this point.
Jasmine, I know you have some reporting to do before you come back and spend some more time with us. We're going to let you go do that. Thank you so much for your reporting on the scene. I want to add to our conversation my colleague, Ken Delanian. Ken, you have, since the earliest hours of this massacre, been trying to piece together and separate out fact from fiction. A big admission today that in hindsight, this was not an appropriate response. The words are like fingers on a chalkboard. I mean, babies died. 2 teachers died. One of the teachers' husband had a heart attack since losing his wife. Let me show you what may be the most revealing explanation, maybe. This is from the Texas Department of Public Safety spokesman, Chris Olivares, who says officers didn't enter the building because they could have been shot.
Right. The active shooter situation, you want to stop the killing, you want to preserve life, but also one thing that, of course, the American people need to understand is that officers are making entry into this building. They do not know where the gunman is. They are hearing gunshots. They are receiving gunshots. At that point, if they proceeded any further, not knowing where this suspect was at, they could have been shot. They could have been killed. And at that point, that gunman would have the opportunity to kill other people inside that school.
Can explain what he's saying there, and just as a baseline, what are you supposed to do if you're with 19 other officers and there are small children and 2 teachers inside with a gunman? What are you supposed to do?
Police doctrine calls for you to go in immediately with whatever force you have in an active shooter situation, even if it's 2 or 3 officers, let alone 19. And I think that was an incredibly revealing comment now by this DPS spokesperson who wasn't there and who's basing it, of course, on interviews and maybe speaking with officers. But this is the suspicion, actually, that people have right now, is that it really wasn't about whether it was a barricaded hostage situation or an active shooter situation. It was about officers that didn't want to go in to face an AR-15. Now, I think, we need to wait for the evidence on that. But based on those comments, I think it's a reasonable question to ask. And I also just want to underscore a point Frank made, which I thought was the second most shocking revelation of this news conference. The most shocking stuff was the 911 calls. I was yelling at my television. I could not believe that there were that many 911 calls. And by the way, we know of one 911 call from a little girl who was later killed. Her grandmother talked about that. But the second most shocking revelation was that the on-scene commander was the chief of the school district police force, a 6-person police force. When outside the school and then later inside the school were very experienced federal agents and police officers from other jurisdictions, people with tactical experience, people with military experience. Why this, and his name, by the way, is Pete Arredondo, according to the website of the school district police agency and some other sources. And why he was allowed to be in charge of this entire scene is mystifying. And there's also a real question about when the Border Patrol agents, those BORTAC, those tactical SWAT team people, decided to ultimately go in an hour later and breach that door with a ballistic shield and kill the shooter. Did they do that on their own initiative, or did the orders finally change? We don't know the answer to that question, but it's an interesting question, and it underscores the sort of the really questionable nature of that decision. I mean, at one point, Steve McCraw, the DPS director, said that on-scene commander determined that children were not at risk. Children were not at risk when 911 calls were coming in, when gunshots were ringing out. It's inexplicable, Nicole.
Frank, I want to bring you back in. I do want to bring in some more new reporting. This is also from the New York Times. It says, an abandoned haircut, a shotgun, and a plan, how one Border Patrol agent got his daughter and others out. Jacob Alvarado had just sat down for a haircut when he got a text message from his wife, Trisha, a 4th grade teacher at Robb Elementary School. There's an active shooter, she said in a message. Help, and then I love you. Mr. Alvarado, an off-duty Border Patrol officer, ran out of the barbershop and sped to the school. His wife and the children she taught were hiding under desks and behind curtains. Their daughter, a 2nd grader at Robb, was locked in a bathroom, she said. Mr. Alvarado quickly made a plan with other officers at the scene, evacuate as many children as possible, armed with the shotgun that his barber loaned him. Mr. Alvarado said he led his colleagues toward the wing of the school that housed his daughter's classroom. 2 officers provided cover, guns drawn, he said, and 2 others guided the children out on the sidewalk. They brought out dozens of kids and their teachers, he said, many of whom emerged screaming. Frank, I don't know what I don't know about law enforcement, but I do know that this was not part of anyone's command and control. This was an off-duty Border Patrol officer getting a haircut, and thank God his wife texted him, and he brought her and his daughter and others to safety. But what was the plan? Who was in charge of making those kids safe, absent the guy at the barbershop borrowing his barber's gun?
Yeah, I don't fault that Border Patrol agent at all. I probably would have done the same thing, and he saved. Yeah, he saved lives, but it raises the larger issue. If he was able and willing to do that, and then we hear from the New York Times reporting that you cited earlier that Border Patrol writ large was ready and willing and imploring that they go in, then we've got a situation where, again, it comes back to that on-scene commander making an awful call. And I hope we are not talking about turf and jurisdiction issues at this kind of time. I am so tired throughout my career of turf and I'm in charge and this is my turf, and but I fear that's where we are, and people seeded that. Apparently, we don't know the story of how dynamic and robust the discussion was in those hallways or outside the school about who was in charge and why they couldn't go in. But this gets to whether or not the most qualified person is part of the plan to be in charge. And it should have nothing to do with turf or jurisdiction. But I'm afraid that's where we may be. And thank God that federal agents happen to be in this area because it's relatively close to the border and there's a presence there. Can you imagine if there had not been that presence there?
No.
This could have been even worse.
That's a nightmare. I mean, it's already a nightmare, but that's how it gets worse. Ken Delanian, thank you so much for your reporting. We have an arm if you come up with anything else in the next hour and a half. Frank sticks around. Texas Governor Greg Abbott will be holding a news conference. And
Thank you, BMI YouTube channel, One Race, the Human Race, All Human. This is horrible. Just completely horrible.